During last week's meeting, the Federal Reserve raised the Fed funds rate by 0.75%, and it appears that increase was already baked into interest rates over the previous 2 weeks. The stock and bond markets have reacted negatively, which just wreaked havoc on your 401ks. So what can we expect to see throughout the rest of 2022? In the housing market? Will mortgage rates continue to go up? Will housing prices continue to fall? Or will the bottom fall out completely? Answers to these questions coming right up. But make sure to stick around until the end while I share the top 5 things you should know about the Fed's plan to reset the housing market. Hey, whoa, wait, reset the housing market? Doesn't sound too good, does it? Last week, Chairman Powell said that American people, you and me, would be feeling more pain. Well, easy for him to say, right? So what does feeling more pain actually mean? And we're going to answer these questions starting right now. Welcome to Ask the Lender. This is your go-to spot for all things money and finance related. On this channel, I share tips on how to pay less money in taxes, advice on obtaining the lowest interest rate available, as well as proven strategies to save and grow money tax free. If you find this channel helpful, please subscribe and click that bell right there to get notified. And help us get some love from the algorithm here on YouTube by liking this video and sharing a comment below. Back in June of 2022, Federal Reserve Chairman Powell told reporters, and I quote, "I'd say if you are a home buyer, somebody, or a young person looking to buy a home, you need a bit of a reset." He said that we need to go back to a place where supply and demand are back together and where inflation is down low again and mortgage rates are low again. Well, that kind of sounds good, but in the months since, economists have openly questioned what Powell meant by a housing reset. Does the Fed simply want buyers to back off long enough to allow inventory to rise? Or does reset mean the Fed also wants home prices, which spiked 43% in just over 2 years, to come back down? Recently, CNN business reporter Nicole Goodkind asked Powell to clarify what the housing reset actually means. And during his long-winded and broad response, Chairman Powell said, and I quote, "When I say reset, I'm not looking at a particular specific set of data. What I'm really saying is that we've had a time of red-hot housing market all over the country where famously houses were selling to the first buyer at 10% above the asking price, even before they saw the house. That kind of thing." End quote. Look, pausing just for a sec, that part that he just said, look, we know that's true. Last year, I had a client pay $1.3 million for a house that was priced at $1 million. That's $300,000 over asking price. How insane is that? Powell went on in his speech to say, so there was a big imbalance between supply and demand. He said that houses were going up at an unsustainable fast level, and that was true. He also said that the deceleration in housing prices that we are seeing should help to bring prices more closely in line with rents and other housing market fundamentals. And that's a good thing. I don't really disagree there, but there's something that you may have missed. Powell is saying that the Fed is happy to see the housing market cool off. And look, to an extent, I think we may all agree with him. The housing boom was not a result of hundreds of thousands of Americans, across the United States suddenly wanting to move during the pandemic. The housing bubble was created by the Fed themselves keeping rates artificially low for a long period of time, like 2 years. This allowed many new home buyers the opportunity to own a home. But that bubble was not sustainable. Inflation is raging out of control and the Fed had to act. Powell continued saying, and I quote, "For the longer term, what we need is supply and demand to get better aligned so that housing prices go up at a reasonable level and at a reasonable pace and that people can afford houses again. The housing market has to go through a correction to get back to that place that he's mentioning." And there you have it, folks. The word reset is code for popping the housing bubble. I feel Powell is admitting that the Fed is intentionally and quietly trying to reset the housing bubble that they created. And in ending his speech, Powell finished by saying there are also longer run issues with the housing market. He said, as you know, it is difficult to find lots now close enough to cities, so builders are having a hard time getting zoning and lots of workers and materials and things like that. But from a business cycle standpoint, this difficult housing correction should put the housing market back into a better balance. Well, what does that mean if you or someone you know is in the market to buy a home? Now, while Powell did not give a straightforward answer, he provided us clues as to where the Fed's housing reset will take the housing market. And in full disclosure, I'm not a financial planner, nor can I predict the future. I am just a hardworking data four who is fascinated with money and finance, and I'm simply sharing information that may help you avoid some common mistakes related to buying a home. I'm also a licensed loan originator, so if you have questions related to the home buying process or interest rates, share them below, and I will help you find the answers. So continuing on, I want to say thanks for hanging around. And now that we know the Fed plans to reset the U.S. housing market through a difficult correction, here are the top 5 things that you should know about that plan. Number 1, we are in a difficult housing correction. Not long after the Federal Reserve began applying upward pressure in the spring on interest rates, the housing market flipped into a cool-down mode. While the slowdown started out mild, it has since intensified. On a year-over-year basis, new home sales are down 29.6%, and existing home sales are now down 19.9%. That sharp housing market slowdown isn't a normalized market, it is a housing correction. At least that's according to Powell. Number 2, the housing correction puts downward pressure on home prices. While Powell didn't come out and say it, many housing analysts believe that the Fed's housing reset is code for home prices to drop. Clearly, the Fed's shift in word choice from June's housing needs a reset to today, housing reset actually means a correction, indicates they are quite fine with home prices falling, home sales cooling off, and construction pulling back significantly in order to achieve their mission. Number 3, the housing correction broke the fever, and that should bring back balance. This summer, Federal Reserve researchers released a paper finding that the pandemic housing boom was driven by a demand surge. Well, it's a no-brainer, not supply constraints. The Fed researchers estimated that new construction would have had to increase by roughly 300% to absorb the pandemic-era surge in demand. The ongoing housing correction has halted that demand boom. Once mortgage rates moved north of 5%, work-from-home buyers started to second-guess moves to larger metropolitan areas. Other groups of buyers who helped to drive the pandemic housing booms, like flippers and second-home buyers, they also backed off. Number 4, the housing market correction will soon spread across the entire economy. The Fed's housing reset isn't just about housing, it's about taming inflation. Housing is a primary transmission mechanism for the Federal Reserve, and its monetary tightening is partially intended to cool the housing market as part of the Fed's effort to fight inflation. Across the globe, central banks are applying upward pressure on long-term interest rates, including mortgage rates, by signaling that short-term rates will remain higher for a longer period of time. As mortgage rates move higher, home sales and home building move lower. That causes demand for services like home loans and moving crews to fall. It also causes demand for commodities like lumber and durable goods like refrigerators to fall. Those economic contractions then spread throughout the rest of the economy and, in theory, help to weaken the labor market and curtail inflation. The housing market has already clearly weakened. However, we're still in the early innings of that weakness spreading throughout the rest of the economy. Okay, wrapping up with number 5. The Fed's mandate is not housing. Wait, what? No, it's not housing. The Fed has a dual mandate from Congress. 1, maintain maximum employment and stable prices. But as long as inflation remains above the Fed's 2% target, Powell says the latter will be the central bank's main focus, even if that means pushing the economy into a recession to achieve it, which, if you ask me, they've already done that. And they're quietly doing that so as not to make the current administration look like fools. Well, they are, but during an election year. Even though we know they are either complete idiots or intentionally wrecking the economy, draining your 401ks and sucking home equity away from American homeowners. Now, ideally, Powell would like to see the Fed's housing reset return us to a normal, balanced housing market. However, at the end of the day, the Fed's mandate isn't to make sure housing is affordable. If inflation proves sticky, one could foresee a scenario where the Fed pushes so hard on the housing market that new construction nosedives. And if that occurs, it would likely send us into the type of recession that stamps out inflation, increases unemployment, and causes the U.S. economy to crumble. However, it could exacerbate the nation's housing supply deficit. That would hardly be the type of balance would-be buyers are seeking. Who do you know looking to purchase or sell a home? Make sure to connect us together, and that way I can help them make sure that they are up to date on the markets. As a licensed loan originator, I will make sure to assist them in obtaining the best rate and term available to them. Don't forget to subscribe and click that bell right there to receive notifications when new content is published. Want to know more about the home buying process? Make sure to check out that playlist below, and I'll see you next time on Ask the Lender.